that's going to use environmentalism and a war. Remember the Club of Rome, one of the premier think tanks that not predicts the future, they create the future. They create realities for the upcoming generations. They come up with the ideas, then they give it to the lesser think tanks to find ways to implement it through media, movies, and novels to society. Well, they came up in 1970s with the idea of global warming. And they say in their own book, the two founders say in their own book, The First Global Revolution, that they were looking for a way to unite the entire planet under a warfare scenario. It would have to be warfare because when there's war, like world war going on, the public will allow their rights to be taken away from them. They'll all work together for less. They'll eat less food and rationing and so on. And they have a common purpose, a common cause. At least they think they do. And government can then expand and take over various areas of their lives where it didn't interfere before. Therefore, a war scenario had to be dreamed up. And the one that they hit upon was global warming. They said that would fit the bill. That's their own words. That would fit the bill. After looking at other ways to do it, that one would fit the bill. Now, when these guys come to a decision like this, and they're unanimous, they never change their agenda. So if it's written 30 years ago, 40 years ago, you can take it to the bank. They will carry it through. Even if we're up to our eyes in snow, they'll still say it's global warming. Now, under this guise of environment and saving the world environment, because man's at war with environment, that's what they say, man's the enemy. We all have to reduce our populations, which ties in exactly with the United Nations. They've said that in their own charter for the Department of Agriculture, the United Nations ultimately will be responsible for doling out the food to every nation in a quota system. And eventually, they'll use it as a weapon. If you don't reduce your population, say in the United States, they'll give you less rationing. And of course, even if you try and keep up or keep to the right quota of population, they'll give you less next year or 2 years' time once you're used to the idea, until you keep reducing it and reducing it and reducing your population. So there's disincentives to have children.
And we already see that. California's getting rid of the tax credit for children. Australia's gotten rid of it entirely, and now says in their news they're going to start taxing having kids. And then they even have parents come on that are stakeholders. That means they're minions. They always have these little rent-a-mob groups who represent the population saying, oh, I love it. I think it's a great idea. And I had the British scientist on last year who was all over the news calling for wartime rationing of food and water and carbon footprints, water footprints, to have laws to make us skinnier, not eat as much, being fat is bad for the earth, or even being a few pounds overweight. They say you've got to be rail skinny. So a total tyranny, and he's hailed as a great guy, and I had him on, and, you know, he basically said, yes, we're going to control everything you do and have carbon rationing on eating food. And I had another scientist on, and he said that I would have to be sent to a re-education camp if I didn't conform.
Absolutely. They've been using techniques like this for years on children at school. And now it's to go into the adult world as well. And what they're training us is that we have no privacy, of course, that government inspectors can come into your homes at any time, regardless if you think you own it or not, and put restrictions on you.
Unisex bathrooms. All of this is about destroying all privacy, all identity, anything that's associated with normal biological activity in the species must be destroyed.
Anything, in other words, that you would naturally fight for, they're training you not to fight, but just to acquiesce and give in. That's the whole key to we're getting trained. And under the threat of environment, the catastrophe, then they're going to use this. They're already using it, of course, to come into your life in every single aspect of your life, right down to what you eat and how much you eat. And are you eating meat? The Royal Society put out a report the other day. Now, the Royal Society is an incredible society. It's got a royal charter to exist. And every famous scientist that's ever existed was a member of it. But it also has listed openly in its own records and history that it was the first totally Freemasonic scientific institution ever set up. So these guys literally, again, are part of the big think tanks. They help plan the future on a political, a socio-political basis. And they have said that we should stop eating red meats. Now, what's the Royal Society doing, telling us to stop eating red meats, you see, until you tie it in with their agenda, because we find that H.G. Wells, in his book, Utopia, and he was an earlier member of the same organizations, he said the world will be vegetarian, completely vegetarian worldwide. You find the same thing in Toffler's book, Alvin Toffler, the big futurist, the pal of Newt Gingrich, who gave out his book to every congressman in the U.S. It's called The Third Way. And in it he says the world we shall bring in will be vegetarian, and it must be so. He doesn't say why. So right down to what we eat, vegetarian diet and all the rest of it, it's all planned for us. And under saving the environment, they're going to force us off protein, believe you me. Because, why protein? When you look at India, and these guys use histories, very ancient histories, and recent and modern histories as well, to the full. And they always have historians on board and philosophers you'll find in the top think tanks. India has been ruled basically by Brahmins, the Brahmin caste or class, for thousands of years. And the easiest people to get to obey you, they're kind of sluggish in certain ways and so on, are people who are malnourished on a very minimal diet. I'm talking about full vegetarian diet here. Once they're in charge of your food, you'll find that even the vegetables become restricted until you're missing out on vital amino acids and so on. But you're very compliant, you're not too bright, you do what you're told, you certainly will never rebel. And that's the technique. That's why they want to bring in the vegetarian world.
And, of course, they're very advanced in genetic engineering, and magically they continue to change the different structures of GMO, tomatoes, potatoes, corn, where it sterilizes all the guinea pigs and rats and other rodents they're feeding them to. And I've had top genetic engineers on saying they believe this isn't by accident.
No.
So they're going in and making the very food we eat sterilizes, and we then see the sperm counts dropping, fertility in women plunging. We're the globalists have been in control of the West. We see the death of the West with on average a 1.3 replacement rate. Please continue.
Yeah, they've weaponized the food. And you see, again, in this world, the world that they decided they were going to bring in an awful long time ago, they said, and this even came out in the Cold War and different books and so on, they said that no truly big international corporation dealing in technology or science could be allowed to be free to go its own way. They even said that the Cold War would be won with those countries and nations with superior sciences. Now remember, food comes under warfare. It always has since ancient times. Monsanto and all these big boys that have an ear to presidents and prime ministers across the world, once again, a special ear, I call it, dictate to governments as to what they want, and they always get what they want. Now, they're part of the military-industrial complex when you go into the history of Monsanto and the chemical industry and Agent Orange and all the rest of it that they've used in past times. You don't bring hundreds of top genetic scientists together that formerly were working in the only places they could work, and that was in the warfare industry. You don't bring them together to make a better carrot or a better potato. You do it because you are truly what you eat.
Well, look at the one plastic they unified out of hundreds of different formulas that didn't leach estrogen-mimicking hormones. They had global adoption in the 60s of the class of plastic that leaches it, and now they admit it's going on and say, well, in a way, that's a good thing, and
yes,
maybe we should put this in the water to stop you having kids. And they put this on the news now, and the yuppies go, yeah, do that to those poor people, not knowing they're under the gun as well. So that's one of their master points, is making kind of the low-level minions feel like they're part of this predatory power trip. But expanding on that, if you look at the GMO foods, again, it's been confirmed to be sterilizing people. Yep. I want the population to understand that we're not just saying this. This is really happening. Go ahead.
Well, plus you have this whenever you get something that you would think would be a crisis, like the males of the West being 80% down on sperm count. And what's left is almost immotile. It's not moving. And every year, for 50 years, departments of statistics